Welcome to Conversation 473. Tonight on the program, our guest is Kassandra Mitchell, a female politician, one of our youth politicians in Grenada. She was aligned to the Progress Party in the last election. So she's going to be on the program tonight to chat with us about various issues of national concern and national importance. You know, we have a lot of stuff here in Grenada that we are concerned about, that COVID has shown up a lot of our issues, and, you know, a lot of our soft underbelly have been exposed. Rolanda is here, Kitaka is here to be part of Nation 473. Welcome, guys. Kassandra, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Nice to have you on Conversation 473.
Well, nice to be here finally. Someone said to me sooner or later I'll end up on the show. Oh.
Well, you know, we're collecting the fighters.
Yes.
So yeah, and hopefully later on in the program you can tell us all about that big fight you had in New York with the white lady. Yeah, given what's going on right now in the United States, that very ugly situation in Minneapolis, and you know how the world has is paying attention to what happened to George Floyd. We'll chat a little bit about your encounter with that white lady in New York, or you fought and won. Uh, that as well. Also on the program, we're going to take a look at, there's a situation. Apparently, there's a situation where a child who is wetting his bed is being made to sleep in conditions that are not proper for a child to be housed in. You know, that story being published by Now Grenada. We will talk about it, but as a journalist, I have absolutely no confirmation that there is any truth to this incident. So we will discuss it simply just based on what Now Grenada has, for what it's worth. And the busmen, of course, you know, every night we keep saying that we're going to be able to touch on the busmen, but we have not been able to do that. Another situation being badly handled by the current government. So many of those situations being badly handled, and maybe I shouldn't even say the government, because it seems as if the police is running the country under the state of emergency. The ministers seem to be no shows in the management of the country, and the police front and center. A dictator's dream to have the police running your country. So we'll talk about the busman situation that is continuing to be tumultuous, the public resisting the 50 cents increase, and with the backing of the government, and the busmen fighting to hold their position. It's Conversation 473. Kitaka, Rolanda, check in, report to me on how you guys are doing. I didn't talk to you guys today, did I? Yes, I
It
spoke to
seems
Rolanda today.
I'm hearing lots of noise, and I don't know in whose background. It seems like somebody's trying to break in. I know it's not coming in from me. I could hear glass smashing. It's been a good day. Today we had all my vouchers printed, sent it up, and called all the single mothers that I'll be helping out. So that was really nice. I did something good and positive today. And it's, so it's been a good day. It's been a good day. I went up very early in the morning to look after the pigs. And I'm going to be doing some farming. So we had the tractors down, clearing the ground, so it's been good.
Kalishta, for me today was a very productive day. Had a lot of things on my to-do list that I got done, some newsletters and other design work, and so it was a productive day today. I got all the things on my list accomplished, so that was good.
Okay, and Kassandra, how have you been coping with the lockdown? How have things been with the lockdown?
Oh, it's been interesting learning to adapt to the new norm. Like many, stuck here with children, learning to be teachers. I've always appreciated teachers, but I think being home with the children and having to take that responsibility many times give me even a greater appreciation for the contribution that teachers are making to the development of our nation's future. Some of our biggest human resources are young people, children. So I think being confined home with two children and having to take the role of being a teacher is really giving me a greater appreciation for the things that they do. So I think for me that is one of my biggest aha moments. Being home, quarantine, and trying to adapt to this pandemic and to this new norm. So yes.
Mm, okay. Well, unlike a lot of parents in this country, I did not have this aha moment because it's the opposite for me. I try to keep my children at home as much as possible. They were homeschooled for a few years, and it was not until the system decided to use that as part of their political fight that they forced social services into my life to put them into the public school system. Of course, it allowed me more time to practice journalism, of course, but coming back home as a result of COVID-19 was simply us going back into our routine, where they learn more, they learn better, and a lot of the negativity and a lot of that they're exposed to when they're out there in the government run schools. I have had a peace of mind that they have not had the Grenadian influence on them for the last few months. So they're eating a lot more of my food, of course, but you know, so I swear they're hungry like every 5 minutes. Somebody's hungry in this house, and I'm saying, what, somebody needs to get a job as soon as COVID is over. Somebody's getting a job. So Archer, the big one, has decided that he's going to be doing a YouTube channel, which Uncle Kitaka, that's the project that he's working on right now with his Uncle Kitaka. Um, so he says he's going to earn me some money, and he
But do
announced
they
quite
miss the
boldly.
socialization though, like their friends? Because I know, like for my kids, they ask me, when is school reopening, and you hear that story from other kids as well. When they're interviewed, that they ask, what do you miss most about, being away from school? And many of them will tell you that they miss, interacting with their friends and the face-to-face encounter, one-on-ones with their teachers. Don't your kids talk about that? Because that's what most kids are saying when we ask them, what are their biggest challenges and what do they miss most when it comes to being away from school during this pandemic?
I don't know. I think with my kids, I am the mommy. I'm in charge. We like to make a joke and say I'm the prime minister in this government here. But also we're friends, right? My children and I keep conversations and like real conversations, not um, little kiddie conversations. We talk about real issues and stuff like that, and they can discuss issues. Sometimes I say, "You guys scare me," because even the 5-year-old grasps certain concepts that you think a 5-year-old would not even be interested in. But we're also friends and we play and stuff like that. So I can be 9 years old and I can be 5 years old with them and stuff like that. So and around the area they've got friends here, so some of the friends wear their masks and come over every now and then, although I had a ban on that for quite a while, and they complied. And they really, during the height of the COVID crisis, my boys really helped me to protect the turf. No one could come. Anybody come home, like there's somebody coming. Oh, where's your mask? You can't come here. I'm so proud of them. They actually, stood with me in this crisis. But my kids are opposite. It's not about the friends and going back to school and stuff like that. One of the last things my son asked me before all this thing had happened was how could he lead a strike with the students against the teachers, because he had serious issues with the school system. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just spoiling them. Maybe I'm making them citizens who won't be able to survive well in Grenada. But no, they're doing pretty well, and the Archer and Zizi. One of the reasons why I have two children is because I said they have to be friends to each other. So they're friends. They quarrel sometimes. They make up. They come to me so that I can referee and stuff like that. And they're doing okay. One of his friends called him today on the phone, and they chatted for a little bit. So yeah, the only real
Well,
problem I
at
have
least
is the
you
amount of
sound
is
like
the
if you
amount of
have
groceries I
everything
have to
in
buy.
order. and that's commendable. But I think for a lot of single parents, one of the biggest challenges that they have is that work life, especially parents who now have to work from home and they don't have a choice. One of the challenges is that work life balance, and trying to balance your kids and working from home, and plus the house chores and all of the other things, and even taking care of your own well-being, because this pandemic is affecting everybody differently, and everybody's going to having to adapt to that new norm. So I think, not just for me, but many other parents, especially the single parents out there, can relate to this, having to find some sort of balance, and dealing with your kids and work. And even those who are not working, many of them are not used to, like you said, having conversations with the kids. Many of them are not even used to having the kids around for so very long. So what I'm hearing now is that, oh, I can't wait for school to reopen. And in a way, I understand the frustration, but it's also a sad reality, if I may, in that many parents over the years have entrusted the responsibility of growing up their kids to the school system and to teachers. So now that they're stuck home with their children, it's it's something else, another challenge that they have to learn to deal with, and having to learn to adapt, and even to learn who these little people are. Because many parents, I mean, you have a good relationship with your children, and I've spoken to you outside of this forum, but many parents don't. So they're stuck home with children that they barely know, that they have given to the system to grow up, and then now here they are, and they don't even know who these little people are. They don't know what they like, what they don't like, and it's frustrating. And I know I listen to the Ministry of Social Development and some of their plans to help parents cope with the mental effects of the pandemic. But I'm not sure if it's working, because I'm here and I hear and I get so many calls. As an advocate, I'm so frustrated. I can't wait to send the kids back to school when it's school reopening, and that's really, really a very, very sad reality for us. And while it's understandable on one side, it's on the other side, it's opening up a whole set of new doors and challenges and things I think many parents and even the system hasn't even addressed, you know. So it's really commendable that you have a good relationship with your kids. You know who your kids are, but unfortunately there are parents out there who have to now learn to adapt and learn who these little people are, because they don't know, because they just handed over their children to the school system, to the teachers to grow. And I'm coming right back to the point where I now have a greater appreciation, and I think many parents too, for what teachers contribute to the system. And I hope that in all of this, that even our policy makers may come to appreciate teachers and their contribution to the development of our young people as well. And you've heard the stories, the whole impasse with government and the GUT. So I'm hoping that this is an eye opener for policymakers, especially those of them who may be parents, to get to see and appreciate what teachers have been doing, their contributions over the years, and hopefully soften their heart, if I may, that in the future that they may have maybe some more amicable discussions with teachers moving forward.
One of the things, Kalisha, I must say, I've spent time with you and your boys and being mother of a son. I've said to you before, I don't know, you have so much patience with your boys. I've never heard you raise your voice. So tell them, you always take your time to answer them. I remember sometime, these kids and them chat so much, you wish that they were mute, but you always take your time, even when they will be getting on my nerve. I knew they was my children, but you always seems to be very, very calm with them. I mean, boys, they're like little wild horses. But you really, as I said, I really admire how calm you are with your boys. And even at home, because even in the background, I'll hear you say, Acha, sorry, wait a minute, mommy is busy. Where most people would be shouting. I've never heard you shout. Do you shout at the kids, Kalistra?
No, no, I know, I am sure I have. I'm sure I have. It's like when it's time to pick up the toys. they, pick up your toys. And do you have a slave in this house? Because it's like, mommy, help us pick up the toys, because they have so much stuff and they want to play with everything at the same time. So sometimes if I have to sweep the things in my way, so, I threaten and I say, the next time I'm passing the broom on this floor, everything is getting swept up and put in the garbage. I'm not going through and bending my back to pick through things and stuff like that. But my position is, and because I didn't have the children in my teens or my early 20s, and I think because I planned and prepared for them, and because by the time I had them, I had already been through a lot of fires, and being a journalist, I had seen a lot of the horror stories of parenting come alive in other people's lives. And because I really wanted them, they weren't accidental. It's like this was a plan. And so these are the things that I need to do to make the plan work. And I don't believe in shouting at your kids or hitting your kids to make them listen. Because if you have to shout at a human being or hit them to get them to listen, then you have a real problem person on your hand. You're supposed to be able to speak to people, and once, twice, and you get them to understand. And of course, they're combative at times. Kids are that way. So they're resisting. They want to push you to see how far they can go. But I treat them like just regular normal people who just happen to be smaller than me. So we discuss your favorite, the prime minister. Acha and I always discussing the prime minister. Ms. Rolanda, you would not like to know some of the judgments he has cast. When I give him information the way I would give somebody information as a journalist on certain things that are happening in the country. And it's amazing to hear some of the opinions that he would bring back, he would give back to me on issues. So, it's just like just treating them like little people, and respecting them, and so that they can give the same thing back. Sometimes I get troublesome too, and I say, time out, go play on your swing outside or something, because I need an hour to do my stories or whatever. And they do it, and stuff like that. But, it's not
Kalista,
100% perfect, but it's
well,
working.
great job, Kalista. It's conscious and love-based parenting, and that's the parenting that we really need, because we are the facilitators and they enable us to the children. And it's another human being with a purpose, with intelligence, who can teach you a lot that's there. And we have to, create that level of relationship where there can be growth and there can be a blossoming relationship with the kids. But someone has a question here that I want to throw in one time, because I find the mothers that talk about motherly stuff. But so now,
We take over.
yeah, so Chevron Stanislas has a question about the education system. He's saying, I'm having a huge problem with this whole teaching system during COVID period. My little brother has been home ever since from SAS Form 2 and has only been contacted once to read 2 chapters from a book and answer questions. I have taken it up on myself to teach him, but I still believe something should have been done a long time ago. The MSTAR platform came out with a bang. Where is it now? Cassandra, as a parent, like, what has been your experience like with the how your children interact with the teachers online and the MSTAR platform, if you have interacted with it?
No, I haven't interacted with the MStar platform. I haven't even tried to go online. What my kids' school has done is use the Zoom platform. I must send out commendations to the teachers and the principal of my kids' school every single day as a ritual. That teacher gets online at 9:30. That's when school starts. And all of the students who can or have access to internet and can come on Zoom, they're there every day from 9:30, and it's just like a normal school except that it's online. So they go through every single aspect of the curriculum that she planned for the day. Then she gives them some time for break, and then they come back on at a certain time, and then they get time for lunch, and then they come back on, and then they I guess they wrap up the school day and they pray and they interact. The only difference is online. So I must give some commendations to the teachers of my kids' school, but my kids attend private school. I have to put that in here. But for other parents that I've communicated with whose children attend public school, I think for what they have said to me is that when they have tried to go on the MStar platform that is not working. I've heard some of similar stories to what Siobhan said, in that some of the teachers are not communicating, but it's not all of the teachers. And I want to commend Siobhan as well, that you did take some sort of responsibility to teach your little brother. And we have to understand, and this is not making excuse for the teachers, but some of them are parents as well. Some of them are facing similar challenges as we are, as parents, as normal citizens, if I may. So we have to take that into consideration. Then I think the internet penetration rate in Grenada is what, Kalisha? 32, 33%. And that speaks volumes for the number of people who actually have online internet and access to internet. Then you have to take into consideration the percentage of the population who doesn't have electricity, even in 2020. And while I've heard and I've listened to, I've observed the press conferences done by the Minister of Education, I've listened to her give, if I may, excuses as to why the platform is not up and running and some of their plans. I think it's confusing because I think one of the press conferences that she did, as a young intellectual, I was rather confused as to what direction the Ministry of Education is taking in terms of getting the teachers prepared and getting the students prepared to deal with future education during this pandemic. So I can't really explain. I think that has to come from the ministry. While I think they may have plans on paper, one of the challenges that we have seen over the years with administrations, past and present, is the implementation of the project. So they may have good projects. It sounds very good in theory, but when it comes to the implementations of this project, then they always seem to have a lot of challenges. So
And Cassandra,
go ahead.
Cassandra, as a young politician, I pick up where you said that your children attend private school. Why did you choose to send your children to private school rather than the state-run schools?
Notice I went through the public school system. I've had the opportunity to talk to teachers, and I've heard some of the challenges that they're facing, including overcrowded classes, lack of resources coming from the ministry, lack of support from parents. And so while we have good case studies where you have people coming through the public school systems who are successful, one of the challenges I see is that students who are quote unquote slow and not intellectually inclined, they are left behind by our education system. And many times this may not be a deliberate thing by the teachers, because when you have a class of 38 or 42 students to deal with, then that child who is not intellectually inclined, or that child who may be slower than the other students, get left behind. And I've heard teachers say that many times they have to take out of their own time to teach that child or those children, to help them to catch on to the curriculum. I've looked at the public curriculum, educational curriculum. I have issues with it in that it focuses too much on academia, and I want my kids to have a holistic education, and that is why I decided to do it in private school, because with the school that my kids attend, they're exposed to a lot of things, culture and civics and agriculture. There's a big emphasis on agriculture and getting young people involved in agriculture, and I don't see that much in the public school system. And while of course you have agriculture and science as one of the topics, I've looked at the deterioration of the 4-H clubs over the years, and I want my children to have that holistic and those options available to them. And in at least in my kids' school, the classes are smaller, so then the teachers get to focus on each student, and they practically know the child or the children like if it's their own, because the classes are not that big. So I
So
have observed those challenges last year.
as a young politician, what are you doing so all our children will be able to have the same opportunity? Because obviously you can afford to give your child, and every parent want to give their child the best education they can. But it come into, as I was saying, growing up in school, we're talking 50-something years ago, I had seen that my parents could have able to buy me the new school uniform or to buy me the books to go to school. But my friends, who was much brighter than I, maybe they started school at 12 or 13 years old. school. They came to school for the first couple of weeks, and then they just couldn't afford to come. And I think now in 2020, we have to really try and let every one of our children, give them, as I say, a good bite of the mango. And you're saying that there are children that still hasn't got electricity, maybe, or well, I know internet, because internet service is quite expensive. Sorry, it makes me really sad. Makes me sad that you have to pay to educate your children. It makes me even sadder to know that there are children out there, there are parents out there, and sometimes in the poor family, you have some really smart kids, but then they just fall by the wayside. And we just, and every mother wants the best for their kids, and they will make the sacrifice. But it's really sad that in 2020, this is what we are speaking about. It's really sad.
I prefer to be called an advocate rather than a politician. So let me just get that out of the way. I prefer an advocate rather than a politician, and for several reasons. But as relates to what I will do over the years, what not, the only thing that can be done is advocating for change in policies. At that level, whenever I get the opportunity to interact with policymakers, that's one of the things that myself and my colleagues we always advocate for. We have been calling for a change in the educational curriculum, in that it doesn't focus so much on academia, and that there is an aspect of it that's skill based. So for those who not academically inclined, as it relates to electricity, again, it always starts at the policy level. And many times I hear people saying, I don't want to talk about politics, but we have to always make it clear that there is a difference between discussing politics and partisan politics, because politics decides a lot of the things, the price of sugar, the price of the top that you went into that store to purchase. So that discussion, we have to have that discussion. Partisan politics is something else, where you discuss the party politics. And I don't like to hear young people say that, because when you talk about getting access to holistic education, when you talk about electricity and having every home with electricity and internet, it always begins at the policy level. And policy level means talking politics.
Because at school, I'm not academic. I hated, I hated, I hated school in the sense that I find it very, very stressful. I think I was dyslexic. I remember going to school, and I just used to get lost once once it goes above the basic, it really used to stress me out. And I remember I used to sit next to, I hope you are looking, Reginald Lord. And Reggie was, he was the brightest in the class. And I remember sitting, and especially in maths, and trying my hardest to copy what he had on his. I don't know how I went through it. I just cannot understand how I went through school. And as you said, it would be so nice if you teach children, because children learn differently, and there are kids that if you could pick up on what your child is good at and push them towards that, than trying to push this book into the head. I remember we had the book Nola on the Farm. I know this book by heart because it was beat into me. I remember I used to be sitting, and my brother, all night, there was a passage that said, the road go up, the road go down, the road go on and on and on. And I was, I don't know how, it is so sad, because when I look at me now, that, I got where I am, and I always say to people, the only thing I've ever passed is my driving test. I had no interest in maths, English. I just wasn't interested. I would get into school at 8, and by 8:30, I was fast asleep. because I had no interest. And I think we have to um, stop making the children that maybe are not academic feel stupid. And now I always say, I'm there for education. I think it's, the government should invest as much as they can. But I think we have to have apprenticeship as well. I know a young guy at the moment that is terrible at school, but he wants to be a carpenter, and and he wanted to be a carpenter from the age of 10. He always say, I want to be a carpenter, I want to build houses and things. Now he's 17 and he has just started an apprenticeship. So, as you said, it's nice. It would be nice if, we look at what children want more. And I always say, look at me, I'm a great example. The only thing I've had is my driving test, and I think I'm doing okay.
Yes, and that's why we continue to advocate for an educational curriculum that focuses not just only on academia, but on skills as well. Because even if you look at our working populace, many of us left school with subjects, and again, it begins in the home too. I mean, while we may talk about the education system, we also have to talk about the homes and getting to know our children, and that's why we began the conversation talking about, Kalistra and her relationship with her boys and parents and their relationship with their children. And that is really, really crucial, understanding and knowing who your child is and knowing what passion that child has. I mean, I have a 9-year-old daughter and she thinks she's a seamstress. And we always try to push that. We give her pieces of cloth and we give her the needle and she sews her stuff and she dresses her doll, and she's creative even when she's dressing herself at home. She comes up with creative ways to dress, and you push that thing. You look at what your kids are interested in, the things that they're passionate about, and as a parent you focus on it as well. My son has a passion for music and for policing, and because I interact with members of the RGPF, now we say, look, my son wants to be a police officer, and and you have them have that conversation. So like when my son talks to a police officer, if he talks to the commissioner of police, then to him it's a big thing and it motivates him. And he asks questions about what does the commissioner do? How do you become a commissioner? Because that is his dream. And maybe it may change. And you go with the tide as a parent because they want to be a princess today and then they want to be an engineer tomorrow and a pilot the next day. But you pay attention to what your kids love, where their passions go, and you support them. So it's not just um bashing the education system, but we have responsibilities as parents as well to invest in our kids' education. Look at what they love and not just push them. You have to be a lawyer or a doctor, or all of those traditional jobs. There are a lot of opportunities out there, non-traditional jobs, skills-based jobs, and that are lacking even in our population, in our working population in Grenada. Many times I see we have to hire a pathologist or bring somebody with that expertise outside of Grenada into Grenada when you could actually train people here to do the job. But we don't promote that as parents and even in the education system.
Well, everybody, even the parents, their dream for their children is to pass subjects and get a job, put on the polyester suit, and go and work for somebody in an office or become a lawyer or something like that. And I think the inferiority complex that is a part of the life of generations of Grenadians, stemming from slavery and not understanding the proud history of our ancestors who were kidnapped and transported here, that we feel like our kids have to do a particular thing to make it. It's one of the reasons why a lot of parents would hold their head and bawl if their child says, I want to be a farmer or I want to be a carpenter. A carpenter, I remember last year before sometime, Kimpton Kawana Bay, that high-end hotel that is being built on the flamboyant site, they needed high-end carpentry furnishing, and they had to bring people in and import it in. Now we're talking about tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But there were no, I mean, we have skilled Grenadians here, of course, but they could not look internally for this high skilled, high quality product. They had to import it. Um, so, if you're a carpenter, people look down on you. I'm sorry to say, but it's still happening. If you're a carpenter or an electrician or those kinds of things where you have to work with your hand and you have the opportunity to be your own boss, people look down on it. They want their kids to be a lawyer. I mean, we're overflowing with lawyers in this country,
Mhm.
and more are going to study. I think do the government pays the economic costs for people to go and do law in this day and age when we need so many other areas, professionals in so many areas that are actually going to aid in development. I mean, how many lawyers can the government actually use to help push the development of the country? And so it's being a doctor or being a lawyer or business administration. Okay, a whole bunch of people are going getting scholarships and going to the SGU to do business administration, but no one is teaching them how to be entrepreneurs. They're still going to get that degree and go look for a job with somebody,
Mhm.
right? um, and so it's part of the problem. It's a psychological situation that we face, that people just don't look at the sort of holistic education that you're talking about, Cassandra. In the public schools, that's not the focus. And once my kids entered that system, I noticed that. I mean, we have a balance here where we're doing backyard gardening, so they're exposed to agriculture and the value of agriculture. Acha is all into the natural sciences and stuff. He does his own research. He listens to documentaries on World War II, right? We talk about the history of Grenada and who is who and who did what in Grenada over the years and that kind of thing. So the parents also must take responsibility. We can't just depend on the school system, because believe me, the curriculum we have now, the school system we have now, it works for the politicians. It's
Mhm.
created the population that we have here now, that sits by and says, "Here is my life, destroy it a little bit more." So it works for them, and I don't see them in any big hurry to change it along the lines where people like me or you would be satisfied that we're actually building something and creating something that is going to aid in development and empowerment of our
And
generations
I
to
was
come.
actually going
So
to that same point that you're making, where I don't think that we are actually going to see that mindset change, because we talk about changing mindsets, but it's not going to happen with that generation. And that's why my emphasis always is on young people, my generation, the generation after me, and after them. And even with my generation of young people, I have my concerns, because you sit and you listen, and many times I tend to get the impression that it's only a few of us that are quote unquote woke, and a few of us that understands social and economic and political issues, or if any there is, and even some who understand it, they don't have the guts, if I may, to talk about and address these issues openly. Because that's the only how we are going to create mind change among our generation and those after us and those after them. And my emphasis is always on targeting that vulnerable group and that demographic, because that is where I believe the change is gonna come. Because you said it, if you look at our generation of Grenadians, you just have people who are just like a daisical and laid back and just accepting things as they are. I mean, it's okay for us to talk about the issues as it affects us in our little group and in our little corner and inside our living rooms. But when we get the opportunity to address those issues to the policymakers and those who should be making change, then we're dumb. Nobody's saying anything. And I've seen it happen over and over and over. You go to forums, and before the politician or the policymaker walks in, everybody has a concern about agriculture and youth issues and domestic violence and sexual assault. And when the politician or policymaker sits down at the head table and asks, "What are your concerns?" and everybody's is no one's saying anything.
Well, it's funny, Cassandra. I went to a conference where they had a GIDC, where they brought someone in to do this conference for young entrepreneur. And it's how people make people feel. When she came in, everybody bought one of their products. And I also do, sorry, soursop tea. And she took my tea and she held it up in front of the class, and she said, "Now, what do you think of this tea? What's your opinion? What do you think? Give your opinion." And this woman came from Trinidad, and everybody, people didn't know what to say. And she said, well, I don't think it looks very Caribbean. It looks very like something from China. And, and when she said that, she said it in a way that would if it was somebody that was really trying, would really break their courage. And I stood up and I said, yeah, but I do between 7 and 8,000 US a month from this. And I said, does anybody do that with what they're doing? And they said, people, they said no. And I had just won. I just was a runner-up in Richard Branson did exhibition for small business, doing business with big business. And I was one of the first runner-up for best packaging. So you see how sometimes people can break somebody's courage and their spirit by sometimes the words they use. And that's why sometimes people are afraid to speak up. So we prefer to go and buy something that is foreign than to really appreciate what we have. When I look at the furnitures that we have here, I see people will go and go into the stores and them in town and spend $5,000-6,000 on a sofa, and you can have one of our workmen here doing very nice carpentry work, but because it looks too local, people do not want it. They need. We've been so brainwashed that they think, right, I will go and I will spend $4,000-5,000 on a settee that is made out of cardboard. If it's rain or if anything happens, the kids jump on it. It will last a year or so, and while in the lifetime, you'll be still paying back from it. So it's really getting people, is showcasing our skills, is having enough expo where you could bring people in, and or even the government opening a huge warehouse and charging rent that is affordable. We have so many empty government buildings that is going to waste. Even use the stadium, and where people don't pay any rent because the building is left empty 99%, and give people rooms there where they could showcase their skills, open little shops and do things. I mean, when you look at it in the mall, people are paying between $4,000 and $5,000 a month for rent. How can anybody manage? How could anybody show their skills? How could our creativity? A friend of mine sent me her daughter, who was 9, of the dresses she's making and what she's doing. I started off the same age as your daughter. I always like fashion. I remember I got a sewing machine when I was about her age, and I went on because that's what I love. As I say, I did not like school, and I was the only Black woman in England that had a chain of clothes shop. So it's about encouraging our children and don't making them feel when they come and they say, oh, I would like to be a seamstress, or I want to be a doctor or a dancer or a fisherman. We seems to laugh at people, laugh at what they want to do rather than encouraging them. And I think that is what we have to do more. And then the government has to put more into our young people, because at the end of the day, they are the future of our island. That is the only how. We shouldn't have to be importing skills, on the island. Give apprenticeship to people. I've never met a young lady that says, Miss McQueen, I want to be a businesswoman. It seems like they do not understand what most people think a businesswoman is, or if you're working for yourself as a woman, either you have to be selling in the market, or they don't know you could own things. You could start off very small and you can grow your business. I always says to people, when I started off, I had nothing, literally nothing. I remember the first day I was going to open my business. I had half a slice of plantain, and half a slice of bread and phoning my sister and saying to her, can I have £10? And she said, you're opening a business. Why, why do you should have money? I didn't have any money, but what I had was determination. And I didn't have in England, if you say you're going to do something, people do not laugh at you and say, you would never do it. They'll encourage you to say, yeah, that's a good idea. Go for it. And I think that's what we need to be doing more with our young people, our children, and maybe we can start having exhibition for, you say your daughter love fashion, and doing things like that for them, maybe having like a fashion shows for them. And because now with the internet they could sell their clothes anywhere in the world. That we really need to encourage that as a people and as an island.
Ms. McQueen, Cassandra, two issues.
All right, got it.
Yes, you were muted a while ago. Child abuse and child protection. Child protection in Grenada. I know that's something that you're very passionate about. Like, how has that been going in terms of your fight and your struggle to put things in place to protect the children of Grenada?
I want to commend, before I start about what I'm doing, I want to commend the stakeholders over the years who have updated laws and policies as it relates to addressing the issue of child abuse in Grenada. We have come a long way, again, in theory. What I want to see is more of those laws being implemented. We have way too many cases of child abuse in Grenada throughout the Caribbean, because it's not just Grenada. I've been monitoring statistics coming out of St. Vincent, Jamaica, Trinidad, and it is a pandemic that bothers me. And again, you see a lot of updated legislation, but when these cases happen, then we're not seeing the laws being enforced. I think too many times that the penalties are too lenient when it comes to you know punishing, if I may, the perpetrators. I think that will be a deterrent. And then also, one of the things that I talk about in my campaigns when I go there and address child abuse is that hurt people hurt people. And while we talk about addressing child abuse and protecting the victim, of course, which we have to do, because many times they are minors, I want to see the system also have a balance and focusing on the perpetrators. And let me tell you why. Over the years, I'm young, but I've been doing this for over a decade. And a lot of the times, if you sit and you talk to perpetrators, you'll realize that they too come with a history of abuse. And I've said it and I'm going to say it again. We talk about, and the media tend to make it seem like if perpetrators are males only, but we have female perpetrators, because if you talk to men who tend to be perpetrators of sexual crimes, they will tell you that their first sexual experience is with an older female, a cousin, a neighbor, and we don't address that. Many times they are victims of sexual abuse themselves. So I want to see some emphasis focus on getting some help for perpetrators, hopefully that they don't become repeaters of the same crime. And I want to see stricter penalties for perpetrators of the crime. And I know, and I'm looking at statistics, it's actually going through my mind that of stories and cases that I know of in Grenada. Many times when a perpetrator is caught by the system, it is not the first time him or her have done it. It's just the first time that they've been caught, and they don't get the help, and they become repeat offenders, and that bothers me. They go to jail for 3 months or 3 years or 2 years, they put on bail, and a lot of these things, it bothers me. And I understand that we are a small society, we only this big as a community, but I've seen cases where perpetrators or people are accused of the crime and they go back in the community with the victim, and that victim is re-traumatized all over again. I've heard cases, and I'm sorry to have to say, but this is the reality, where victims are supposed to be getting support from the system, Child Protection Authority or Ministry of Social Development, and they just let it slide. They have 1 or 2 counseling sessions, and then the victim says to me, I haven't heard from the social worker, I haven't seen the counselor. There's one particular case that I know of where the ministry took a victim of sexual abuse, a child, a minor, put them in a home, and the victim said to me, they dropped me there and I never saw them again. And I mean, and of course, this doesn't happen in every single case, but it happens too often, and we have to address it. And that's why I keep saying to people, when you talk about these issues, you have to talk about the realities and the loopholes and where we are going wrong in order for us to know where we can go right.
Well, Cassandra, who can you speak to? I know of a child who was abandoned as a baby. Do you know the well, it's a case, it's a personal case. Do you know this child is now 17? He has not got a birth certificate up to this date. Social services does not care. Maybe there seems everybody here, if you show concern, they take it personal. Like, look at this child that was reported sleeping in a cage outside. The neighbors raised concern. The police knows about it. And this child is still, if you see exactly what they are doing in America, where they arrest people here, nobody take responsibility because there is no consequences. They does not lose their job. You cannot go and ask them a question. Who is in charge? There is nobody in charge. This is the problem I am having. If I have a problem at work, you can come and report to me or my manager. There is nobody in charge in Grenada. How could a child, how could you are saying to the neighbors, look out for abused? The neighbor called the police, they call social services, and the neighbor now has to go to the papers. Come on. Who is going to take responsibility? Who is going to lose their job? Who is going to investigate and say, well, right, had the report, you did not do anything. You're going to have to go home until we have a full investigation. People does not care. I once said to many people in Grenada, as long as it's
I've been submitting Miss McQueen's audio there. But Cassandra, were you aware of that issue? Did you hear about that issue that Miss McQueen is mentioning?
Yes, and it's not just her case. You hear too many stories of this happening, and of course, I know the policymakers and those in the relevant ministries will tend to disagree and say, all right, we are doing what we're supposed to do. But to be fair to them, I know that the government has limited resources, human resources, financial resources to address the number of child abuse and sexual assault and domestic violence that seems to permeate our society. But at the same time, she said that she said to the neighbor, got to look out for child abuse. We need to. I don't even know if we could go back to a society that once looked out for each other, because we are saturated with so many societal ills where we lack trust in our neighbors, and maybe rightly so, because you have so many cases where the neighbor is molesting the daughter, the uncle, or the brother, or whatever, and one has to be careful when one is a parent. But how do we really resolve this? Can we resolve this? Can we beg or ask government to allocate more resources to the Ministry of Social Development? Will that work? Maybe hiring more social workers, and not just people who are looking for a paycheck, people who actually care about young people and children, and trying to alleviate the statistic of sexual abuse and domestic violence. That is the kind of people that of course, for me, that I want to see. I've had cases that came very close to home. I've seen how the authorities handle it, and I'm very, very disappointed. And again, I'm not saying that this is for all cases, but Miss McQueen is right. I mean, too many times you go to the ministry, or you call the police, and you report a case, and you see very little being done. And then in cases where the perpetrator is actually arrested or picked up by the police, then it begs a lot to be questioned, because that person is brought before the system, and then you hear that they only charge $1,500, or they get 3 months in prison, and that victim is looking on and thinking, you know what, I didn't get justice. And even as a parent, as a victim who may not be talking about your issue. You're looking on and saying, but hey, you know what? They only charge him $1,500. He only got 3 months in jail. Is it worth me going and telling the police that? And I've heard victims say that. No, why should I go to the police? Nothing is gonna come of it. And
There,
Well, you
go
know,
ahead.
one thing I believe is that the administration does not put much care or emphasis. I mean, they talk a lot about a lot of things, okay, but I think, Cassandra, you know, and I know that all of it is just talk, really. I mean, it's a bunch of lazy slackers who just likes to talk and don't get anything done, because there are certain key areas where the resources must be made available because the future of the nation is under threat, and ruining our young people, whether it is with sexual molestation or physical abuse and those kinds of things. What we are going to have is a nation of warped people, psychologically damaged people who are not going to be able to hold their own and be productive members of the society. I mean, sexual molestation and child abuse is a big part of the kind of population, the kind of citizenry that we have here now. A lot of people are walking wounded as a result of that. And the Child Protection Authority, for instance, I just think they're a big joke. I'm sure there are dedicated people who try in every situation. There's always the exception. But a few incidents that I have come across tell me that they're not ready yet. Look at that situation up in St. Mark, where the 3-year-old was being sexually molested by this guy that got international attention. Grenadians abroad and everybody were up in arms about that case where the guy was charged with $1,500 that you spoke about, and that was as a result of sloppy investigation. The guy was taken into the police station, and within 3 days, the matter from picking up the question to charging him to having him stand before a magistrate. It all took about 3 or 4 days. I mean, how could you possibly investigate and prosecute a case like that where a child recounts to you 18 different occasions when she was sexually molested by a big hardback man, and you resolve that matter in the justice system in 4 days? So the police let that child down in the worst possible way. And then to add insult to injury, the director of public prosecution, I mean the grandmother of the child, is a fighter, so she wanted to get some justice out of this, so she kept on going. I went with the mother to the director of public prosecution's office, and he said he would be willing to reopen the case. He was not happy with the result of it, but of course, what the magistrate does with what's in front of him is not something that one wants to go against. But he would have been willing with new evidence. So there was evidence that the child got an STD, and the doctors had this paper. The people from Child Protection took that little girl to a doctor in St. George's to get tested, and never brought the information to the office of the DPP so that a new investigation could be opened based on that evidence. They never did. They never
and they
bothered.
still, actually, sure, I'm sure they still have their job.
Of
They
course, they
still
still have their
have
job.
their job,
Even
as you
even the
said.
even the Nevlin John issue in the Grenville Magistrate Court, where she set this guy free with, as far as I'm concerned, no consequences. That $600 or whatever that he was charged, and this is money that is going into the pocket of an NNP diehard advocate for psychological therapy for the child, because it was money for the therapist, and the person who's giving the therapy is so deep down in the NNP pockets that you could not find him even if you put six arms together to search for him, right? So there go the public getting screwed left, right, and center again. The police did not investigate the case. I spoke to the mother of the child. I spoke to people close to the case, and based on what I learned, the police also did not handle that. The magistrate herself said that she would have liked to do something different in how the matter was dispensed with, but she could only go with what was in front of her. In fact, she asked during the proceeding, she asked social services, "Do you have anything else to add?" She was begging them for some evidence so that she could put this guy away. And they had nothing because they did not bother. They looked at this little woman up in the country with her child as not deserving of justice, and they didn't do anything about it. As far as I'm
I know
concerned,
of case.
the whole lot of them
I
needs to be
know of
gotten rid of.
cases now. I know of cases now where social services of children does not turn up in court to support the kids. They have no interest, especially when the children are poor. I have seen cases where I know somebody the police caught with some weed, and there is case where children has been sexually molested. The person that was found with weed, within 2 months, the case was called. The children that was sexually molested, 2 years gone, and they're not interested. But you know something? There is a saying that the Jamaicans say, Jumbie know who to frighten. Because one day they're going to touch they're going to touch a wrong child. And you know something? If there is a GoFundMe page going around for somebody, I don't advocate in murder, but for somebody to go and sort these people and them out that interfere with people's children, I would be the first one to put my money in it, because if the law is not giving people satisfaction. I had a policeman said to me he had to speak to his boys about bad touch and good touch, because you cannot even allow you frighten of everybody, because the police, I'm not saying the police, because in cases I've seen the police done their job, but the government is not protecting our children. The government is not protecting our children, and one day somebody is going to take the law into their own hand, and then we're going to start doing something. I'm not saying vigilantes or so, but we have to do something. It really upset me every time I think that everybody is frightened of leaving their child because you don't know who is looking at that child. And the police and them, the
But
state is
how do we
refusing.
hold our public servants, our public officers accountable for not doing their jobs? And that is something I've asked, regardless of what sector or area you work in, how do you hold them responsible? Because if you're mandated, you're hired by the Public Service Commission to do A, B, C, D, E, and you don't do it, do we as citizens have recourse where we can say, you know what, John Doe didn't do his job, he's had with the ministry. What are the legal repercussions for that? Because after all, taxpayers' money are paying them. And we need to, and that's why I keep saying that we need to have that conversation of politics, not partisan politics, but politics in that as young people, as Grenadians, we understand our constitutional rights, our constitutional responsibilities, so we can hold our public officers responsible. Because you hear it all the time, but in the case of Grenada, our economy is booming. But I mean, at the same time, you know, as taxpayers, as productive citizens, we have to find the money. We contribute to taxes to pay the wage bill every single month. So I think that we should have a say. Politicians are not there to represent themselves. They're there to
Cassandra,
represent the will and the responsibility of the citizenry.
look at the case with me, with the spice mask. You're saying people has, can we hold them accountable? When I tried to hold Spice Mass accountable, the government took me to court. Right? The government is in court with me. I try to hold them responsible. I try to say to the gentleman, that is your job. I have a right as a Grenadian citizen, as a taxpayer, to participate. And what did they do? They didn't sit down and speak and say, yes, Miss McQueen, we understand it's a mistake. They took 3 barristers in court to say, how dare you? So we cannot, who could I go and complain to? I spoke to the minister of whatever culture. I sat down, I tried to speak. So you cannot complain to anyone. If somebody is not doing their job in Grenada, you cannot phone up the person in charge of them and said, listen, this is the problem I'm having. This person is not doing their job. They vex with you as well. So there is nobody
But
you
you see,
can
I
go
think what
to.
has happened over the years is that they have created a mindset of dependency and a misperception that politicians have power And but when you look at it, power is in the hands of the people. And if we start preaching that and letting people understand, hey, yes, the prime minister has his responsibility. Yes, the minister of culture. Yes, the DPP, the arts minister, the finance minister, the education minister. If we start preaching that and letting people understand that
People, people just do not care. I do not know what we are going to do about it. But sometimes I think, even with this program, I'm thinking, I get so upset. I think, in my God, how long would I be able to go on and do that? Because I just cannot stand to come on and hear that you have a 10-year-old sleeping in a cage. The police know about it. Social service know about it. They came up there. They interviewed the parents. They left without nothing. The neighbors still had to go back and speak to it. And then you go back next week, and it's the same people in position. And if you want to phone up tomorrow and speak to one of them or going in there, I know of cases. I know Earl Maitland went with a young girl who grew up in a home, and she had a child. She had a job. She had nowhere to put the child. And they went there, and the manager refused to come out and speak. Refuse. They have an attitude. It's like they have this type of attitude where they think it is their business, so they don't have to speak to it. They don't have to report to anybody. They don't have to give no report to the public. They don't care. It's like, how dare you? Who are you? They will not speak to you. There is no concern. They always have. I've been to social services to speak to a child, and the head of that department had her radio on, playing music and looking at me like, who do you think you are? But something, is a good thing, I'm at that stage, because I would have fight them. It really, so it's
Well,
really making me angry.
the system is a bit of a mess. There's no question about it. Grenada is really an embarrassment. This wonderful dear land that we love so much, it has so much potential, is a big letdown. Our institutions are not functioning. Our politicians are on an unlimited vacation, really, from minding the people's business, and it's a total mess. And one of these days we're going to wake up and realize. But Kassandra, one of the things that the government continues to let the public down on, the public have been calling for a sex offenders register. Um, I know that what a penalty in the magistrate court, or the high court, I can't remember which, at some point, was that a pedophile was ordered to move out of the community where he lived and move into a new community. Now, they were simply shifting the predator around, but no system to warn people that he was going to be in the neighborhood. He could have just gone ahead and preyed on somebody else's child. The government, the administrations, past and present, have done nothing really to put a sex offenders register in place. We would need to enact that in law, and they seem to be dragging their feet. Of course, we can't correct a wrong with a wrong, and one of the arguments they presented is whether or not it is a violation of somebody's constitutional right to create such a mechanism. I don't think so, really. But why do you think government is so reluctant to to do that? Do you think it's because they're worried that some of the anointed ones may have to go on the register?
You asking, you seriously want me to answer that? Of course, and
Well,
I've said
not
it.
not the last one.
I've said it both in public and in private. Unfortunately, I've had, I think you mentioned earlier that what we have in Grenada are damaged people walking around. Sexual crimes didn't just pop up in our generation or the generation before me. It existed before that. I've had the opportunity to talk to individuals who are far older than I am and who shared their stories of being sexually abused, and these perpetrators are still walking around. Some of them have high level jobs, they know who they are. So maybe that is one of their concerns, that if we create a sex offenders registry, then some of our friends may be on the list. You and I both work on the ground at the grassroots level, and you hear stories of high level government officials, businessmen who are accused of being pedophiles, and where they're not suffering from pedophilia, then they just prey on vulnerable men, women, boys, and girls. So maybe that is one of the reasons. And even I'm assuming here that some of these perpetrators, alleged perpetrators, may be paying into the pockets of our policymakers. So, while you won't want to lose the hand or bite the hand that's feeding you, somebody once said that. So, and we are a small society, so these are things that one, as a policymaker, have to take into consideration, whether or not, if I create a sex offender registry as a minister, as a policymaker, as a government, would I be putting one of my friends or my brothers or my cousin on the list? How is it going to affect me? And of course, you have to take into the whether or not it's constitutional, and whether or not you'll be infringing on people's constitutional rights. And that is a discussion that the public should get involved in. But interestingly enough, as I'm talking about the whole issue of sexual crimes, I remember almost a year or two ago when Django, Ian Thomas, and I think it was Miss McQueen and Earl went out, and they were trying to get community people to sign to show support for creating stiffer legislations and penalties and address the whole issue of sexual crimes in our
Sure.
country. And I saw clippings where people say, no, they're not doing it. And it makes you wonder why. And again, we talk about mindsets and whether or not one can change the mindset of individuals. I was rather surprised that even people in the religious community refuse to get on board in an initiative like this.
Maybe a second.
So, it's a
Well, I
whole
had one of
it's a whole dynamic of issues and factors that one has to address. I mean, we can bawl and scream and call for stiffer penalties, but if the hearts of the policymakers are not in it, and other factors that I've mentioned are taken into consideration by them, then are we really fighting a losing battle? You hear government getting so much money to fight, sexual assault and domestic violence. Recently, I was just reading up on the progress of the Spotlight Initiative, and I'm concerned because sometimes I feel that we're spending money over and over and over to do the same thing the same way and expect different results. I mean, the same
Different
players.
results.
I mean, anybody in the region who knows me knows that I'm very, very vocal. And I remember one time I was looking at a picture where certain government officials were sitting at a table, and I reached out to somebody in the United Nations and I said, but that person is a perpetrator. I know you may not be aware of it, but that person is an alleged perpetrator sitting at the table. And one can argue about whether or not people change over the years, and but no, I beg to differ many times on this, because a lot of the times, these perpetrators don't get up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to change. I'm going to stop preying on vulnerable children or vulnerable women. It never happens as that, as far as I'm aware of it.
I mean, one might need therapy and all that kind of thing, and acknowledgement that you have a problem. And I don't think that there's, in the Grenada situation, I don't think people ever acknowledge that, look, I have a problem. I've heard so many stories about people within the system at the level of policy making who are accused of that sort of thing, both with young people and abuse of women and that kind of thing, wife beating and all of that. So very, very ugly situation. Nobody's minding the store. Cassandra, one of the things I wanted us to talk about while you were on here is the Blue Growth Project. And I want you to do most of the talking on this. I want you to explain a lot of the finer points of the Blue Growth Project and the implications of that project and what it means for me and you and your 9-year-old daughter and my 9-year-old son at that level, and what government is aiming to do with the Blue Growth Project. Can you do that?
Well, let me pull out some documents here so I can get my facts. But technically, or obviously, we are a small island developing state, and we tend to focus a lot on tourism. And I think and I say it all the time. In theory, on paper, you see all of those great plans in terms of biodiversity, and paying more attention to our marine environment and tying it into tourism, and it sounds good. But when you're on the ground as an advocate and a grassroots individual, and you actually see how these things are implemented. First of all, my biggest concern when it comes to any project that governments implement is consultations. As a young member of civil society, I tend to always get the impression that we are just the rubber stamp that government needs to get funding. So they have a consultation, and many times you attend and you see the same faces there, one or two of us, and then they they ask for, what are your opinions, and in some cases they come and they tell you what they're doing. So it's not like if they necessarily want your opinion on, how do you think this project is going to implement Grenada, what are your suggestions. In rare cases it ever happens like that. They come and they present their plans to you, and you may have concerns. Of course, you express it for those of us in civil society who are vocal, and then they pretend to listen, and they go back and they tick the box to say, all right, they had a consultation with civil society, just to say that they consulted, so that they send the document up and they get funding. That is for me one of the biggest problem that and I've said it to my civil society colleagues who are willing to listen, that is about time that we come as a united voice and say, you know what, enough is enough. We are not always there to bash government plans or any administration plans. In many cases, they may be good plans, but we have concerns, and concerns from a grassroots level that we think can be incorporated into these projects, but they don't listen to us. I've seen it with the budget, where they ask, civil society, give your input, and then we give your input, and they send the document back and say, you know what, your input wasn't taken into consideration, and you write again and you say you have a concern about A, B, C, D, and nobody pays you any heed. The box already ticked, they already met with us, consulted, and that's it. That's what, for me, that's one of the biggest challenge and issue I have with any project that government makes. So with the blue growth thing, you hear all of those nice phrases being thrown around about, biodiversity and tying in our marine environment with tourism and all those things. But when you actually see the plans that they have on paper, you wonder, how is this going to affect, one, the fishermen? How is it going to affect, community people? Because I mean, and I'm speaking specifically to the Blue Growth Master Plan. You see all of those major infrastructural projects being done on our coastlines. And one, you'll ask about feasibility studies, environmental studies, you ask for copies of it, and they're nowhere to be found. But then you see these big infrastructural projects, and most of them are on our coastlines. So sometimes I'm asking myself no, because I'm still looking at the original Blue Growth Master Plan project, and I'm asking myself, where is this going wrong? Because I mean, you look at, I think there is this. I'm trying to pull up the documents as I'm talking to you. In Guelph, where they're trying to move the fishermen out of an area where they once fished. And they will tell you that they met with the fishermen, but the fishermen have concerns. And when they meet with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, then it's back and forth with them. So just to speak in layman terms, I am concerned about the Blue Growth Master Plan. I'm concerned about the major infrastructural project that is going to have, the lack of environmental studies, the lack of consultations with the people who are going to be affected, the community people. And I'm not just talking about, the consultants and government coming in the community and meeting with you once or twice and saying they consulted with you. Because what I've heard from individuals and community people on the ground I'm speaking about over the years is that, they have a consultation. One, either the community they don't hear about it, when the consultants show up, it's just one or two or three individuals who are there. They never reschedule, and then they say that they consulted with the community. And of course, the technical jargon that is being used by the consultants, and that's something that I always have a problem with when you talk about consultants. I'm seeing it even today during the COVID-19 pandemic, where people who are non-Grenadians, and I respect them and I respect their trade, let me say this, but they are consulted, so they come to Grenada many times. And I'm telling you from experience, they have never been to Grenada before, so they're not familiar with our culture. Many times, even the first time they come to the Caribbean, and they come to us, the people, ask us what we think. And we have said it in forums. Why are you hiring a consultant to come to the people to ask them what their opinions are? If you wanted their opinions, why are you asking a consultant? Why are you wasting money and you're hiring a consultant to hear from us things that you can come and ask yourself? And I mean, I'm laughing because I remember that conversation with a recent consultant that came in Grenada. Yeah, I mean, you don't know nothing. This is the first time you come in here. You come and you're asking our opinion. Our opinion is going on a document and then go back and present it to the policymaker. So
And
hold on, let me
I think that the
just-
moving of our port, the port in St. George's,
yeah.
moving all of that to Grenville, that is part of the Blue Group. Is that part of what that project is?
Yes, I'm actually trying to. I actually have a document that has most of the info. No, I don't think it says it's in my filing cabinet. That has more, and it's online. I just have the hard copy of it, and that's why I keep telling individuals, Grenadians, you must learn to read and ask questions because it's out there. And I'm sorry to say this, or maybe I'm not. One of the things that I've noticed that our politicians or policymakers is that they feed off of our ignorance. They realize that as a people, many Grenadians don't read. The information is right here. It's called Investment Prospectus for Blue Growth 2017. We're in 2020. So that is how long this information has been out there. So you have the moving of our port, the moving of Fort George under the guise that they're relocating the police headquarters. If you see the nice hotel, I'm trying to get it for you so they can't say I made it up. It's right here in front of me in hard copy. So they're moving the police headquarters from Fort George to put a nice hotel. They have plans for the Carnage, for Monu's playing field, where they're going to be putting what I think is hold on, I don't want to say the wrong thing for them. People come and hold it against me. Hold on, I think it's a health, science, and technology zone. That's what they call it. That's the Monuj area.
So the Monrouge playing field is going to be taken away and for that development.
Yeah, but
And
we
then
hardly have access to the
and also
LNG.
the fort, you know what keeps sticking in my craw, the fact that they are considering putting a hotel on an historical site where countries across the world are preserving their historical sites and using it as income generation and, excuse me, a preservation of pride and that kind of thing. And I understand the Chinese, the Blue Growth project depends a lot on foreign investors, and the Chinese seem to be moving full speed ahead with that.
Yeah,
And that our that entire
For Fort
historical
George, I think.
section from Fort George to the Carnage, that whole
Yes,
section there,
that whole
the
section. So it's
library
actually,
and all of that.
but Kalisha is actually from the National Stadium, go right across the quarantine point on the coastline.
Grenadians, if
So that is part of the Blue Growth Master Plan. And again, I have no problems with tying in. And let me say this: I have no problems with development projects and trying to move Grenada. If you look at, I hear a lot of times, I'm actually reading some of the documents where some of our historical sites are compared to Italy, like the Carnage, for instance. And that's all well and good, wanting to develop the area and make it more attractive to tourists. But for me, as a young Grenadian, I think, and I would always advocate for the keeping of some of our historical buildings, like the museum and the public library. I'm hearing so many stories about the museum. I remember one time actually calling out, I think I had tagged you in it, to get our journalists to investigate what is exactly going on with the National Museum. I have some idea, but I want them to do the research first. Actually have some facts before me as to what has happened with the National Museum. I've called out some individuals. They have refused to answer me as to what is the status of the museum because you're hearing so many stories. And I know that as part of the Blue Growth Master Plan that they have plans to develop the whole Carnage area. And I'm concerned whether or not that the museum, part of our history, is tied into those plans as well. Somebody called me the other day and they said that they have no access to the museum. I don't know if you're aware, Kalisha, that there are people who rent spaces in the museum for
Yes.
dance and other things, and now they're saying that they have no access to it. And there's so many other
Oh,
stories.
they finally thrown them out, because I know that was in the making, that there was this whole coup and this whole takeover, and the Pitts who had run the library for so many years were being pushed out. John Pitt, who carried on the legacy of his father in that area, they a National Museum Trust, I believe, or something like that. And they were being pushed out, and a new board had been put in place, even while the old board still had time. And there's issue of changing over bank accounts and utilities and things like that. So, and the information I have, it was like a virtual coup. And one wonders, if this is all part of gaining access back to these prime property of great historical value. And you said you have no problems with the Chinese, but you know what? One of my biggest problems with the Chinese is wherever they build anything, the architectural style, the design of it is Oriental. It is not. It is not Caribbean. It's not Afro. It is they imprint their own culture and their own architectural design and vision on it. So if it would really break my heart to see a Chinese hotel built on Fort George with all of those curly roofs or whatever. I don't know what the name of the architectural
Bukalista.
style, but it would be a
Akalista.
travesty. Go ahead, Kitaka.
Bukalista. Even on a deeper level too, I mean, like, we have to also understand the Chinese aid and so on in the external world is a part of the developmental agenda. Like how they develop the Silk Road and everything is all a part of the agenda. Like it's not necessarily about goodwill for a particular country. It's strategically placing themselves in positions where each country in the world is totally connected and dependent on the Chinese government and China for necessities and certain things that are very vital. So then that tightens their grip on the world. I mean, and it's an outpost as well for the people to come over here to live, because I mean, making Grenada and the rest of the world a part of home. So we have to always understand that as well. And even when we take stuff and all the debt that we are going to incur, what is the cost of that in terms of what natural or natural resources that we have that may be under siege? Because when you cannot pay that loan 20, 30, 40 years down the line, China, you are at the mercy of China.
Well,
So that's
well,
what I'm saying. I just want to correct. I don't know. I don't want to give an opinion on the Chinese right now because I've always asked the question. Because I look at the Belt and Road Initiative, I look at the Blue Growth Master Plan. You see, so it's not no you're making this up. So much loans being taken from the Chinese and the idea and all those things. And one of the things I am concerned about is the lack of transparency. Because while we may be grateful for the support, government isn't transparent as to what the terms and conditions of these loans are, especially with the Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, it was how much, what, $40 million or something of that $1 billion of that effect. And I'm saying, all right, you know what? We're grateful for the money, but you look at Belt and Road Initiative around the world and the outcomes of them, and I have not seen, and these are things that are supposed to be public information. What are the terms and conditions of that loan? Even for the Blue Growth Master Plan, where is this money coming from? I'm concerned, just like you, Calistria, about some of our historical buildings and historical sites and prime properties that seem to be catching the interest of the Chinese and the Russians and other people. And I keep saying, but no, are these properties, the museum and the library and all of those prime properties, I can call quite a couple others, are these part of the Blue Growth Master Plan? Is it part of the Belt and Road Initiative? In that if we don't pay back that money, that they can come and they can take our assets, and then what is going to belong to us as Grenadian citizens? I sat with a
well,
group
they
of
will.
older women, and I was talking about the Blue Growth Master Plan and government's plan to move the ports, and they were saying to me that they're not aware of this. They was like, this is the first time I'm hearing of this. I was like, but it's in writing. Like they call it the North for the Fort, the North Harbor Resort Hotel, at a cost of 200 to 260 million dollars. A 300 to 350 room 5-star resort would occupy the very prominent site of the existing hospital, creating an iconic image to the entrance of St. George's Harbor. An ocean walkway would link the cruise ship Esplanade to the Caranage. And then they have their draft and they have their outline of how it's going to look. And I keep saying, but why aren't we as Grenadians paying attention to this? The one in Montrouge, you look at the plans for it. You have the sports centers, the Grenada's Beach Tourism Center, and Montrouge Health Center. Which is part of the Blue Growth Master Plan, and nobody's paying attention to these things. And when you talk
But
about
Cassandra, question though, Cassandra. In terms of timelines to some of the things, like where are we at right now in terms of status and timelines to implementation of some of those things?
that is a question that I cannot answer. I know that a lot of these development projects are being affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, the other challenge is that government seems to lack transparency as it relates to being forthcoming with information about these projects and how it's going to affect us. And when you ask questions, they tend to dismiss you or look at you as anti-progressive or anti-government, and that is not always the case. For us as young people, we are the ones who are going to be inheriting many of these loans that governments are borrowing. I did not think it funny when the Prime Minister, in his capacity as Minister of Finance, made the comment about he wouldn't be around to pay the loan. We are going to be around to pay the loan. And when I heard that, I was like, well, why aren't young people waking up and holding him and his administration accountable for this debt that they put in Grenada in?
But if Cassandra, if people are going to work in the museum and they have been locked out and they're not speaking up about it, do you think somebody once said that Grenadians do not care? And it just, as I said, I've only just come back, and it's making me just listening to conversation. It's really making me think that people are getting away with these things because we just do not care. Because I cannot understand. Do you think Rolanda McQueen, will pay my rent and somebody could lock me out? I think it's funny. I think it's really, really, really funny. People have to speak up.
Well,
Is that
sometimes
you paying?
sometimes where and how do you speak up? You would make a ruckus and you would make a fuss, but not everybody has that fortitude. Not everybody has that personality. You and I are gonna kick down doors and we're gonna tell the police, come and arrest me. Here's my receipt for my rent. But not everybody is like that, and this is one of the difficulties that we
But
have.
if you cannot do it,
Also, a lot of
politically,
people
sure.
a lot of people are also sacrificing themselves for partisan politics. Okay, people who would have voted for the government, would have supported the government, would have maybe gotten a voucher for their children for school transportation for the government from the government, would allow things to happen to them, because it is really a travesty the way this particular administration, and right now I'm pointing a finger, this particular administration, the NNP, has tied up the people, used their poverty and their disadvantaged circumstances to tie them up into a position where they cannot fight for themselves. The thing about it is not just one thing that has turned us into a nation of sheep. It's a lot of factors. It's the walking wounded from child rampant sexual molestation of our and physical abuse of our children that has gone unchecked with no justice and nobody to genuinely speak up for our children. It's poverty. Okay, it's a lack of awareness and not and education. And when I say education, I'm not talking about having 15 CXC subjects, which kids come out of school with 15 subjects and they're as dumb as a doornail, right? Lack of awareness, lack of civic awareness, understanding who we are within the population, within the governance of the country. It's a lot of sad factors that impact on the country in large numbers. It is fear from watching our brothers and sisters murdered on Fort George in 1983. A lot of these things wrapped up together to create this monster that we have here now, that allows 15 people to take us to hell in a handbasket, and everybody afraid to say, you know what, this basket is not going to move unless we get things in order. So
But
sometimes,
this hasn't got, I cannot say it has anything to do with who personally you support. if I support a government and I see they're doing something wrong, I will say, I support this policy, but I'm not going to agree for that. There is no way. I does not care how much. It's like being in house with your husband. Yeah, you love him, but if he's going to abuse you, you're going to say, well, because my husband loved me, pays the mortgage, I'm going to put up with it. We have to speak up. Not everything the government is going to
No,
get
Miss
right.
McQueen, that analogy, that example you just gave there, that is more the rule than the exception. The woman who stays because the rent is being paid and the food is being bought, and the husband is there. Doesn't matter how much she beats her. He says this is actually the rule rather than the exception. So people stay because things are not perfect, but there are levels of comfort in one area, so they're willing to sacrifice something else. And it's not a pretty situation. It's impacting into some very serious areas. Okay, we are we are presiding over the destruction of who we are as a people and our country. And not just that, also we are also presiding over our physical resources. Okay, they're about to devastate the coastline with that blue growth project at a time when they're also talking about climate change and our coastline is being battered, right? But most of the development is there. All of this development, a lot of areas are not going to be accessible by our Grenadian people again after all these highfalutin developments happen. Okay, just think about it. We won't be able to go to Fort George anymore. People after when this hotel is built, we won't be able to afford a room in this hotel, would we? You know, we might have to save up for 5 years to be able to spend a night in these hotels. We're going to go there because we have to make the beds or cook the food or serve the drinks. And this is what our loving prime minister, who dances so well and who always has his hair well dyed, has put on a platter for us. But
And it's
it's
interesting because I remember when attending one of the consultations to speak about the removal of the police headquarters from Fort George. And the consultant sat there and he said to he's and I mean anyone who was in the room could testify. He said that one of the things that concerned him, he came, he read the project document, the project concept, and he had the opportunity to go and look at Fort George and maybe go to a couple other historical sites. And he asked me, he said, one of the things that came to his mind is, where are the young people of Grenada? This is a historical site. He stood right next to me and he said that.
Yeah, but Cassandra, where are you guys? Where are you guys gathering the
But
young
we
people?
are seen as troublemakers. You voice your concern, you go to the consultation, you air your concern, and all they deem you as a troublemaker and somebody who is anti-progressive or anti-NMP or anti-government, and that is not necessarily the case. I am a Grenadian citizen who is concerned not only for my future as a Grenadian, but my kids' future. I want my kids to be able to access the museum. I want my kids to be able to have access to the beaches and to Camahan Park. And that is what I am fighting for, my culture, my heritage. But not every young person or every Grenadian views it like that. I mean, again, and it has to do with that mentality that was inculturated and inculcated into them over the years. That as long as you talk about something that you're anti-government or you're anti this, it happened to me recently. I read things. I try to be objective in my approach, and when I put information out there, I'm not here to come to bash the government, but I'm here to ask questions as a responsible and a productive Grenadian. And the person's like, oh, you're anti-Keith and you're anti-progressive and you are a government opponent. And I said, tell me where in my writing did I ever say that I'm opposing the government? As a Grenadian, I have a right to question my leaders. They are there to represent my interests, not theirs. And unless we can't get our fellow Grenadians to view it like that, then we have a serious challenge on our hands. You're not opposing the Prime Minister. I have absolutely nothing, as far as I know, personal against the Prime Minister of Grenada. But I'm a Grenadian. I'm living here. I'm affected by every single decision that he makes, him and his cabinet. So I have a right
Pe-
to speak out if I think something affects me.
People does
well,
not realize that one person
the fear the yeah, one person can make a difference, but the
make a
fear, Ms.
difference.
McQueen, Rolanda, you had to have been here to have seen it built brick by brick this situation now where people are afraid, where people are living in fear, where a one party's dictatorship state has been created. You had to have been here to see the genesis of it, the growth of it, to really understand why, and to understand all of the other factors at play, to understand why such a small number of our young people are fighting for the country. And the movement is on now to re-energize people and to get people to fight for the country. And it's going to develop, and eventually the numbers are going to increase. And that's why a lot of people keep talking. That's why Kassandra is always talking and getting passionate. That's why I don't mind getting shoved down by a minister or government, or getting slapped around by the operatives of the tongue, from the tongue of St. George, because I know that the conversation has to happen. So hopefully by the time Archer is sitting in the big chair, maybe even the prime minister's chair, you never know. Um, by the time he gets there, and by the time Cassandra's daughter gets there, and they're the ones in the adult population, that we may have arrived at the place where we need to be. This is not something that's going to happen in a day or 2 days, because it, believe me, it took a long time to happen. We have been asleep since since 1983. We have been asleep as a nation. And a lot of this had to do with what the United States did after the intervention, okay, to put us back into a coma and to put us to sleep. And we have slept for a long time. But I feel us waking up now. And I think even as COVID has put us into our own homes, there still is a waking up. I've been listening to people in the lines talking when I occasionally when I go out, and people are waking up, and young people, they are waking up. But it's been a deep sleep, so it's going to take a while for them to stretch and feel strong again. But the fight for the nation, it's going to happen. It's already begun, and it's
But
going to escalate.
we need leaders. We need leaders. It seems like a lot of people, as Cassandra was saying, when you speak, people think you're anti-government. What you do need is leaders, people that will come out there, people in authority, and would speak up. People
We don't
that
we
do.
don't we don't we don't need leaders. We don't need leaders and people in authority. We need an awoke, aggressively committed population that is going to speak in the best interest of the people. We've had enough leaders. We've had leaders and people in authority. The people who are letting us down are the leaders and the people in authority. Okay. And now it is time for the regular folks who are not in authority and who are not called leaders to again take back the power of being involved and having a say and having their voices listened to. And the leaders, we don't need leaders. That's not really the issue. There have been a lot of leaders, and still they have not done anything. A lot of people have come, great speeches, great talking. They love people, they care about them, and they get into the politics. And it's so much fun to ride on the planes and go to the conferences and wear nice hats and all that kind of thing. And they simply just immerse themselves in the system and became part of the oppressors of the people, and those who are destroying the country's resources and destroying its people.
Well, it's
So,
a good thing COVID is here, Kalistra. Driving around the country, I see lots of people, Grenadians now even today, someone asks if they can work, have a bit of land, if can they work that land. It seems now Grenadians are going, if you look around the island, it's so clean of people planting their own food now. So hopefully, COVID will be something good for us, that we will stop selling our land. Because we're selling to everybody. Anyone that come, it does not matter. We were selling. Even today, a cousin of mine said he went and he got some land. I think the deed was over 80 years old. They went into the ministry and got that land that belongs to our great great grandparents. So maybe COVID will wake us up and make us realize we cannot rely on anybody but ourselves. We cannot afford to wait for food that come in hundreds of thousands of miles from abroad, that they have to put all artificial coloring on it. They have to send it, they have to pick it before it's even mature for us to eat. Maybe COVID will be a good thing. As you said, people had time to sit in their house and start to think. And they realize that if you look now, the government is not giving, they're only giving money to people that was employed. The people that wasn't employed, that hasn't got, I mean, I have a guy that was working with me. He was somebody that, down and out. He came, he worked with me, great worker, but he hasn't got an NIS number. I don't think he even know where his birth certificate is. He's somebody that hasn't got a stable home. And I put in for him to get that $300. I mean, we've been paying his NIS because they're taking his money on a temporary number just to put it in the system. And when we phone up and I said, but listen, this guy, he has no idea where to find his money, where to find anything, but he hasn't got a bank account. We've been paying, and they said, no, they can't give him his money. But they were happy to take it. So now this poor man, I didn't believe he could read and write properly, will have to try and go through all the stress that he was trying to avoid. And you think they would make it easier for them. Having a bank account, to open a bank account in Grenada is like giving birth to a child. It's one of the most difficult things to do. You need to have a bill. He hasn't got a permanent address, so he's not going to have a utility bill. He hasn't got, it is so difficult. And if NIS coming into the work and the people are
But
not.
Miss McQueen, he can open. I don't think you need all of that to open an account with the credit union. So you should see if he can do an account
No,
with the
you
credit
do. With
union.
the credit union, you need two
You
forms
need all of
of
that, two
ID.
forms of
Yes,
ID.
yes. You need two
Okay,
forms, and
so
one of
And as
them
you,
is
as
a
you, as you mentioned, agriculture, and you said that you're hoping that our mindset is going to change. I don't think so. Um, I mean, out of necessity, I think many people are planting. The whole COVID pandemic brought a lot of strains on the agriculture sector. Initially, farmers were not considered essential workers. They were not considered essential at all, and it took an uproar from farmers to the RGPF and to the COVID committee and the administration to say, you know what, we are farmers and we consider ourselves essential. We feed the nation, so why aren't we given access to the market or whatever? It took an uproar from farmers to actually get the administration to see how important they were to our food security. And I'm looking and I'm listening to individuals speak, especially at the policy level. And I think there's still an emphasis on tourism. I mean, recently you had the Prime Minister boasting about the March IMF report, when the IMF said that the Grenada economy is going to be boosted by 6.25%. And I guess maybe based on that analogy and that projection, the Prime Minister said, you know what? Now we have 350 million US to inject into two more hotels at a time when the hotel sector has no guest. And I mean, and that really bothered me. But one of the things that the Prime Minister neglected to mention is that in the said report, the IMF also said that the tourism sector is projected to contract by 9%. So while the IMF was projecting a 6.25 economy boost for Grenada, it was also projecting a 9% contraction in the tourism sector in the same economy. And that is only for March. I think we have an upcoming IMF report, and that's supposed to be out in June. Well, we in June. So I want to hear if those projections are the same, because I am listening to Timothy Antoine from the ECCB, and his projections seems dim to me. And I keep wondering why the continued emphasis on tourism sector when the whole COVID-19 pandemic showed us that the sector is vulnerable. I mean, one pandemic and the entire tourism
and
sector shut
the
down.
entire
And we're still managed.
Cassandra, we're almost out of time. I was, when I heard him talking about the hotel developments again, I was offended. I felt that there you go again, screwing us over, for want of a better phrase. But do I really want to use a better phrase? At a time like this, and it's just pure laziness. I believe that they're not even bothering with the other productive sectors, and just that Absolutely. Just a second, see, I'm still on the program. Just pure laziness. I think that they cannot muster the courage and the resources to assist the other sectors that matter to grow. Who are we going to put in these hotels? The tourism sector is not going to recover for a little while again, and we're not talking about this year. A lot of it's not just getting rid of the pandemic and the COVID-19, but also that people have to recover their finances to be able to travel and spend time in hotels and stuff like that. So very, very irresponsible governance as far as I am concerned, in the way they are behaving. And there's a comment from Kurt. We're going to close up the program because we went so far over time. We're not going to take final wrap-up comments, Kassandra. So I will take your last comment, which was a wonderful wrap-up comment, as your closing comment. And, the IMF report, the March report, would have taken into consideration conditions prior to COVID-19. So the June report is really what is going to be reflecting what has happened during the pandemic. And people need to know the difference that on the two different conditions, that the March report versus the June report. So I'm sure it's going to be vastly different, and sure that he's going to try to sell it in a very pretty way, as he's so good at doing when it comes to the economic situation of the country. So, Kitaka, there's a comment from Kurt, which goes back to what we were saying about people. He says, we do not have a place or a unity group that we can gather and enlighten those who are not enlightened, I guess, because sometimes people want to reach out to whom towards reach out, but to whom and towards what goals. And I think he's talking, citizen action and cooperation, citizen organization, and being organizers and getting people together in the same place with the same voice, the same intentions, and the same goals, that a movement can be built, I think, is the point he's trying to make here. So thank you, everybody, for being on the program. Kassandra, a pleasure as usual. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about Airbnb, but go girl. um, and Miss McQueen and Kitaka, as usual, always. My pleasure. And to the viewers, Earl was here, and Brian Mastermind Joseph, thank you for coming back. It took me throwing words to you today on Facebook for you to come back. I'm glad to see that you're giving us your love again. Thank you for being here. Brian is a member of civil society, along with our advocate, Cassandra Mitchell, who is on the program with us tonight, and another strong voice in defense of Grenada and the development of Grenada. So thank you, everybody, for being on, and the program continues tomorrow night, Friday, our last program for the week, and we look forward to being with you again. Thank you once again, Cassandra, for spending the
No
last
problem.
almost 2 hours with us. Okay, apologize to the kids
Yeah,
too
we,
and
we
stuff
can always
for
talk about the
keeping you so long.
Airbnb thing, especially in light of what's happening with the whole George Floyd
What
issue. So another
situation?
time.
Right? Yes. Yes, maybe we'll bring you back on tomorrow or Monday or sometime, because yes.
Yeah,
So
but yeah, but
everybody,
it's
good night and
relevant
thank
given
you.
what's happening in the US. So anytime you're ready.
Yeah. I mean, it's your experience, and it's a telling story about the conditions which exist, and the relationship between blacks and whites in the United States. Yeah, and you weren't even American. You're a poor Grenadian,
Exactly.
up there, and getting the brunt of the racism. So bye, everybody. See you next time. Conversation
Okay.
473, and don't forget to make your contributions on to PayPal if you would like the more conversations to continue. You can do so. Akitaka is taking care of things like that, and you can make contributions to the show so that we can continue to keep the conversation going. Thanks, everybody.